I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
The orchestra was still playing when King Charles saw the flash of red stones on Camilla's wrist. His expression changed instantly. Conversations faded, glasses stopped halfway to waiting lips, and every senior royal at the banquet table understood that something had gone terribly wrong. Within seconds, the monarch raised his hand, ordered the music to stop, and brought one of the most important state banquets of his reign to a humiliating standstill. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles had entered Buckingham Palace expecting control. A state banquet, the formal dinner held to honor visiting foreign leaders, was meant to display stability before diplomats, ministers, royals, and the royal household, meaning the staff and officials who support the monarch. Instead, one bracelet threatened to expose a private fracture before that audience and the watching world. Camilla had arrived smiling, certain the ruby piece completed her appearance. At first, she mistook her husband's stare for admiration. Then she followed his eyes. They were not on her face. They were locked on her wrist. Her smile vanished, and the queen consort drew her hand closer as though it could hide what Charles had recognized. William saw it seconds later. The prince said nothing, but his jaw tightened as memory struck. Diana's bracelet was not simply an old royal jewel. It was a private heirloom tied to his mother, her life, and the pieces of her world that remained after her death. Seeing Camilla wear it without warning felt less like ceremony and more like an intrusion. Charles slowly placed his dinner knife beside his untouched plate. He lifted one hand toward the orchestra and spoke with frightening calm. "The banquet will pause now." The final note died across the hall. He announced that dinner would not continue until the bracelet was removed and its appearance fully explained. Camilla did not answer at once. Charles knew the piece was supposed to remain sealed inside a private family collection, guarded by strict instructions and unavailable. Its presence meant someone had entered a restricted storage area, manipulated the process, or deliberately ignored palace protocol. A senior courtier confirmed the worst. No jewelry request had been filed. No loan had been approved. The bracelet could not be dismissed as a wardrobe mistake. Charles turned toward his wife and asked where she had obtained it. Camilla finally whispered one name. William pushed back his chair and looked toward the palace doorway. The bracelet had stopped the banquet, but the silence surrounding its true ownership was about to divide the family seated around the table. To the guests watching from across the room, it was merely an exquisite bracelet, set with deep red stones. To Charles, it was a reminder of a marriage scarred by regret. To William, it was a piece of his mother's private world. And to Camilla, it represented something far more dangerous: the belief that becoming queen had finally given her access to every symbol, room, and memory the monarchy had once kept beyond her reach. Charles felt the weight of the past pressing against the present. Diana's belongings were not ordinary crown property, meaning objects owned or controlled for royal use. Some pieces carried memories that belonged first to her sons, not to the institution. He understood that distinction, and that was exactly why the bracelet on Camilla's wrist felt so dangerous. William did not see rubies. He saw fragments of childhood. He remembered rooms filled with his mother's laughter, quiet moments before public appearances, and the unbearable emptiness that followed her death. The prince had spent years protecting what remained of Diana's private world, because those objects were more than jewelry. They were proof that she had once been there. Camilla felt every stare around the table. The queen consort believed Charles could have warned her privately, away from diplomats and government figures. Instead, he had halted the evening and left her exposed before the entire room. Her humiliation hardened into resentment. She touched the clasp again, as though the small movement could restore control. Catherine noticed immediately. She saw the hesitation in Camilla's hand and understood that the bracelet was not an innocent choice. The princess also saw William's anger rising. His shoulders stiffened. His eyes never left the rubies. She moved her hand close to his and gave him a silent warning. William remembered the bracelet inside a velvet-lined case years earlier. It had been marked for private family custody, meaning it was protected for Diana's relatives rather than available for public ceremonies. He knew it had never appeared on any approved loan list. Someone had crossed a clear boundary. Charles faced an impossible choice. Defending Camilla might look like another betrayal of Diana's memory. Condemning her publicly could expose the weakness inside his marriage before an international audience. The king understood that either path carried damage. Guests began rising in confusion as attendants guided them toward an adjoining reception chamber. William remained seated. Catherine leaned closer and whispered, "Not here." He answered without looking at her. She knew exactly what she was wearing. Charles then ordered everyone else from the room, but he asked Camilla, William, Catherine, and one senior aide to stay. Once the doors closed behind the final diplomat, royal ceremony disappeared, leaving only a husband, a wife, a grieving son, and the object none of them could ignore. The banquet scandal did not begin when Charles noticed the bracelet. It began 9 days earlier, inside a private dressing room where Camilla was shown a selection of jewels for the evening. What happened during that fitting lasted less than 10 minutes, but it crossed a boundary the palace had protected for decades. One request, one refusal, and one quiet instruction set the stage for the confrontation now unfolding behind Buckingham Palace's closed doors. Camilla had expected a simple fitting. Each jewel chosen for a state banquet was normally recorded, approved, moved under supervision, and returned immediately afterward. That process existed because royal jewelry carried history, family meaning, and political risk. One unauthorized piece could turn a ceremonial evening into a personal scandal. The queen consort had already been offered several approved ruby pieces. Each matched the diplomatic theme of the banquet, and none carried any connection to Diana. She could have selected one without causing conflict. Then, an archival photograph appeared inside the catalogue, showing the former princess wearing the deep red bracelet Charles had recognized so quickly. Camilla stopped turning the pages. She pointed to the image and asked for that exact piece. The jewelry curator did not hesitate. "That item is not available, Your Majesty." Camilla held her gaze. The curator explained that the bracelet remained sealed under private family instructions, connected to William and Harry. Those instructions meant the jewelry was protected for Diana's sons and could not be treated like an ordinary ceremonial loan. The refusal struck deeper than anyone expected. Camilla heard more than a rule. She heard another reminder that Diana's memory still occupied rooms, objects, and emotional ground she could never fully enter. Even as queen, she could still be told that some doors remained closed. "Then perhaps we need to reconsider who decides what is available," Camilla replied. The curator closed the catalogue and refused to bend. Royal rank, she explained, did not cancel private family restrictions. Camilla dismissed everyone except her senior dresser. Once the door closed, she admitted that she was tired of being treated like a temporary guest inside her own household. The dresser shifted uneasily, but offered no support. Her silence made the queen consort's frustration even sharper. Later that afternoon, Camilla contacted a longtime palace aide through a recorded private call. He knew the older storage inventories and understood where previous archive transfers had created gaps. She asked whether the bracelet could be temporarily reassigned without a formal family consultation. The aide searched the records and found an opening. Months earlier, the bracelet's case had been moved during an archive reorganization, creating a narrow break in the tracking process. He warned her that Charles would recognize it immediately. The king had personally selected the bracelet for Diana during their marriage. 9 days later, that private act of defiance was no longer hidden inside a dressing room. It was glowing beneath the chandeliers on Camilla's wrist. With the banquet hall emptied and the doors sealed, Charles no longer had to disguise his anger. He stood at the head of the table, while Camilla remained seated beneath the chandeliers, one hand covering the bracelet. William watched from only a few feet away. Then the monarch spoke 3 words that stripped the room of every title, excuse, and ceremonial protection. "Take it off." Camilla did not move. Catherine remained beside William, while the senior aide waited near the far end of the table. Charles had kept only those 4 people behind because he wanted the truth before security officers or archive officials entered. The archive was the protected palace system where important objects and records were stored under controlled access. The queen consort looked directly at her husband. "You could have spoken to me privately. I am speaking to you privately now," Charles replied. Camilla kept her hand over the rubies. She accused him of stopping the banquet to satisfy William, and prove that Diana still held greater power inside the family than his living wife. The humiliation in her voice quickly became anger. She said he had chosen the memory of a broken marriage over the dignity of the woman sitting before him. William stepped forward. Catherine reached toward him, but the prince had already made his decision. "This is not about choosing between 2 women," he said. "It is about taking something protected for her children." Camilla turned toward him and insisted she had taken nothing from William. He answered that the bracelet had been kept out of ceremonial use for a reason. Wearing it without permission did not transform it into royal property. It only proved that someone believed Diana's sons could be ignored. Charles moved around the table until no chair or aide stood between him and Camilla. The king lowered his voice, but the restraint made every word more severe. "This was not a mistake," he said. "You saw it, requested it, and wore it. That was a decision. Decisions have consequences." Camilla finally admitted asking for the bracelet after the private fitting. She confirmed that the curator had refused her request. Yet she insisted she had never entered the archive and would not identify the person who delivered it. The senior aide leaned closer and noticed something new. The clasp had been replaced. Someone had altered the bracelet so it would fit Camilla's wrist, meaning the act had been planned long before the banquet began. Charles immediately ordered palace security to seal the jewelry rooms and retrieve every access record from the previous 10 days. Camilla slowly unfastened the bracelet and placed it between them. The stones struck the porcelain plate with a faint sound. "You may regret learning who helped me," she whispered. The bracelet was now off her wrist, but the greater danger lay in the unseen hand that had placed it there. By midnight, the banquet crisis had moved far beyond jewelry. Locked cabinets were being checked, access privileges were being suspended, and senior household staff were summoned from their homes. Yet the most important decision belonged to one man, sitting alone in a private room. Charles understood that whatever he did next would define not only his marriage, but the limits of royal authority inside his own family. Charles sat with the recovered bracelet resting inside its closed case. He touched neither the stones nor the clasp. Regret pressed against anger, and exhaustion made the silence feel heavier. The king knew this was no longer a private argument. If palace systems had been manipulated, then trust inside the household itself had been broken. William entered with his patience already gone. The prince demanded consequences for everyone involved, including Camilla. Charles warned him that acting from fury could turn a family betrayal into a constitutional spectacle, meaning a personal crisis serious enough to damage public confidence in the monarchy. The restricted meeting began moments later. Charles faced the keeper of the privy purse, the official responsible for managing royal finances and household resources, alongside the palace security director, the jewelry curator, and William. No accusation would be made until the chain of custody was confirmed, the full record showing who handled the bracelet and when. Security records delivered the first blow. Camilla's senior household aide had entered the archive corridor twice after the rejected fitting. Both entries used an authorization code connected directly to the Queen Consort's office. William leaned forward. "That is enough." Charles refused to rush. He still held the power to suspend access, cancel ceremonial loans, and remove staff from active duties, while the investigation continued. Yet the monarch wanted proof strong enough that no one could later dismiss the decision as anger disguised as authority. The curator then confirmed something worse. The bracelets case had been returned to storage empty, while the inventory system was altered to show the piece remained sealed. Someone had not merely borrowed it. Someone had designed a lie around its disappearance. William's restraint finally cracked. He told Charles that silence had protected powerful people inside the palace too many times. The future king refused to let his mother's belongings become another wound hidden for convenience. Charles signed the suspension order. "This applies to her office from this moment," he said, setting down the pen. "Then make certain it applies to everyone," William replied. The security director opened a second file and warned that the aide had not acted alone. Another authorization had been used outside Camilla's office, one tied to a different part of the household. The first punishment had been imposed, yet the altered records pointed toward a betrayal reaching deeper than Camilla's dressing room. Before dawn, Camilla's world had already changed. Her jewelry access was suspended. 2 members of her staff were removed from duty, and her scheduled public appearance disappeared from the royal diary. No announcement had been released, yet the palace machinery was moving with brutal speed. For the first time since becoming queen, she discovered how quickly royal privilege could become royal isolation. Camilla left the banquet hall under quiet escort and returned to her private apartment without Charles beside her. Staff entered soon afterward to secure every borrowed jewel assigned to her office. The royal diary, the official schedule of public duties and appearances, was changed before sunrise. Her next engagement vanished because the king refused to display unity, while suspicion still surrounded the household. The queen consort entered her dressing room and stopped. The jewelry cases were gone. Only faint marks remained where the boxes had stood hours earlier. She gripped the back of a chair, lowered herself slowly, and stared at the empty table. They did not even wait until morning, she told her senior dresser. The dresser moved closer and tried to reassure her, but Camilla asked the question neither of them wanted to hear. "Do they think I am a thief?" Silence answered first. The queen turned away, wounded by the hesitation. She had spent years fighting for acceptance, yet one bracelet had pushed her back into the role she feared most. The outsider blamed for entering a memory that did not belong to her. Charles made the isolation complete. Camilla requested a private overnight meeting, but the king refused. Through a palace aide, he said he would speak with her only after the access investigation had established who removed the bracelet and who altered the records. The suspended household aide then gave a documented statement. He admitted obtaining the piece, but claimed he acted after receiving a handwritten note carrying Camilla's personal cipher, a private identifying mark used to confirm instructions from her office. Camilla denied writing it. The claim shifted the crisis again. Either she was lying, or someone had copied her authority and used it to protect a deeper scheme. Catherine received another disturbing detail from the jewelry curator. The replacement clasp carried a tiny repair mark linked to a jeweler previously used by a different senior royal household. The princess immediately understood the danger. Someone outside Camilla's closest circle may have helped prepare the bracelet. Late that morning, William received a private request from the queen consort. She wanted to meet him alone. No Charles, no palace officials, no aides. Camilla promised she would explain why she wore the bracelet. Stripped of ceremony and surrounded by suspicion, she turned to the one person least likely to forgive her. There were no courtiers in the room, no security officials, and no monarch positioned between them. William entered expecting excuses. Camilla stood beside the window without jewelry, titles, or ceremonial armor. For years they had spoken through duty, protocol, and Charles. Now, for the first time, the woman who had become queen faced Diana's eldest son alone, and admitted that the bracelet had never truly been about fashion. William had agreed to the meeting, because he wanted her account without staff shaping every sentence. Catherine supported that choice, but she gave him one warning before he entered. Private sympathy, she said, must not erase public responsibility. The prince carried those words with him because this was no longer only about grief. It was about trust, access, and whether royal power could excuse a deliberate violation. Camilla did not hide behind confusion. She confirmed that she had requested the bracelet and allowed an aide to find a way around the curator's refusal. The queen consort accepted that her decision began everything that followed, from the altered records to the stopped banquet. Then she admitted the real reason. Camilla told William that she had spent years feeling measured against Diana. Every room, every jewel, and every public gesture seemed to carry the same comparison. She believed that wearing one unmistakable piece connected to the former princess would prove she had finally moved beyond that shadow. "I thought wearing it would make the comparison end," she said. William did not soften. The prince told her that the bracelet could never give her that victory. Taking his mother's jewelry without permission did not defeat the past. It showed how deeply she still feared it. Camilla then revealed how the false note was created. According to her recorded private account, the suspended aide produced the handwritten instruction after she made the request verbally. He copied her personal cipher, the identifying mark used to confirm orders from her office, so he could protect himself if the bracelet was discovered. The queen also admitted knowing the clasp had been changed. The original fastening was too small for her wrist. That confession removed any remaining claim that the appearance had been accidental. William turned toward the door. Camilla stopped defending herself. She said she would accept removal from all jewelry selection decisions and send private written apologies to both William and Harry. For the first time, she did not ask Charles to shield her from the consequences. The prince paused beside the closed door. "You wore it because the comparison never ended for you," he replied. William agreed to tell Charles that she had finally spoken honestly, but he made the boundary clear. Truth might affect the punishment. It could not erase the violation or restore immediate trust. For the first time, the family possessed the truth. The next question was whether the monarchy could survive hearing it in public. The palace tried to control the announcement, but one image told the story before any official statement could. At the following day's diplomatic reception, Charles stood beside William and Catherine, while the chair reserved for Camilla remained empty. Within minutes, that absence became the most discussed royal image in Britain. The bracelet was no longer a private family wound. It had become a public test of accountability at the highest level. Buckingham Palace confirmed that the banquet had been interrupted because an item from a restricted private jewelry collection appeared without proper authorization. That collection meant personal family pieces kept outside normal ceremonial use. The statement avoided naming Diana, but the silence only sharpened public curiosity. Camilla withdrew from the rest of the state visit. Charles continued a reduced schedule with William and Catherine because canceling everything would have deepened the diplomatic embarrassment. The king needed to show that the monarchy could still function, even while his own household was divided. Outside Buckingham Palace, the pressure grew quickly. Broadcasters reported live near the Victoria Memorial as a crowd gathered behind the barriers. One woman held a photograph of Diana wearing the ruby bracelet. Another raised a handwritten sign that read, "Memory is not a costume." William saw the image before entering the reception. The prince said nothing, but Catherine noticed the change in his expression. She understood why the message struck him so deeply. His mother's memory had become public property again, pulled into a national argument neither he nor she could control. The next morning, a national newspaper pushed the crisis even further. Its front page placed two images side by side: Diana wearing the bracelet years earlier, and Camilla wearing it at the banquet. Across the top, one headline dominated everything: "The jewel that stopped the palace." Public sympathy split almost immediately. Some condemned the queen consort's decision as a calculated violation. Others argued that Charles had humiliated his wife by stopping the banquet in front of foreign guests instead of confronting her privately. The king watched the television coverage alone. When Diana's photograph appeared, he turned off the screen. He knew the past he had spent years managing had returned, and this time the entire country was judging how he handled it. Later that day, the palace issued a second statement. The responsible aide had been dismissed for falsifying authorization and altering the archive record. Yet the statement also confirmed that Camilla had personally requested the restricted bracelet. During the reception, a camera lingered on the empty chair beside Charles. He glanced toward it once, then turned to William and continued greeting guests. The public had delivered its judgment through images, headlines, and silence. Now Charles had to deliver the decision that would define his reign. Charles did not end his marriage, strip Camilla of her title, or pretend the bracelet had appeared by accident. Instead, he chose a consequence designed to address the true offense. Before William, Catherine, and Camilla, the monarch placed Diana's ruby bracelet back inside its original case and announced that no member of the royal household would ever again use her private legacy to settle a personal rivalry. The scandal ended with neither revenge nor absolution, but with a boundary finally enforced. Charles gathered them after the investigation had concluded. The dismissed aide carried responsibility for falsifying records and altering the archive system. But the king made one fact unmistakably clear. Camilla had requested the bracelet, approved the effort to obtain it, and knowingly wore it before the world. The monarch then announced that Diana's private jewelry collection would be transferred into a protected family trust, a legal arrangement designed to preserve property under clearly defined control. William and Harry would supervise it together, removing the pieces from ordinary palace access and preventing another unauthorized loan. Camilla listened without protest. The queen consort lost authority over ceremonial jewelry selections for one full royal year. Every future request connected to her office would require approval from the collection's keeper and a second signature from Charles's private secretary, the senior official responsible for managing the monarch's personal work. William watched her closely as she placed a handwritten apology before him. Camilla admitted that insecurity, not duty, had guided her decision. She acknowledged that wearing the bracelet had been an attempt to defeat a comparison that had lived inside her for years. The prince accepted the letter. He did not offer immediate forgiveness. Charles then turned toward his wife. He told Camilla that protecting their marriage could never require him to erase the pain of his sons. The king also faced William and warned him that honoring Diana must never become a weapon used to punish the living forever. William understood the difference. Accountability had been delivered. Revenge had not. The prince decided the bracelet would not return to the general archive. It would remain sealed and unworn until Princess Charlotte was old enough to understand its history. Only then could she decide whether it should ever appear publicly again. Charles closed the case and passed it to William. The future king held it for a moment and said, "This goes back to the family." Camilla's greatest loss was not a jewel or a privilege. It was the belief that rank could conquer memory. Charles's greatest victory was not stopping the banquet. It was proving that even a queen must answer when she crosses a personal and moral boundary. The crown preserved its dignity because it chose accountability over concealment. Diana's legacy remained protected. Camilla faced a measured consequence, and Charles ended the crisis without destroying the family he was trying to hold together. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.